So hello and welcome to our latest episode of the Kith Kin podcast, Stories from the Hospitality Industry. And I'm really happy to be welcoming Annica here today to tell us all about the ups and downs that have brought her to where she is and what makes the hospitality industry so special. So hi, thank you so much for coming and joining me with this conversation. So can we just get started with an introduction to who you are and what you do, please?
My name is Annica and I run a company called Two Forks. We help food and drink, actually mostly just hospitality companies, really connect with their customers and take them on very deliberate customer journeys from that first time visit to regulars and eventually becoming that kind of fan and ambassador that talks about the business. And we do that through brand voice and messaging development. And also we do menu optimization. I'm the biggest menu geek that you'll ever meet.
How exciting.
So, yeah, that's me.
It's just so exciting. You just saw my reaction, how excited I get about menu, because it is actually so difficult to get that right. And yet when it works, it really works. So I am really excited about getting into all of that later. But I want to start from the very beginning, and I want you to tell me, how did you start in hospitality? So where did you start? What was your first experience in hospitality?
It actually all started with menus. Even as a child, when I remember being 8 or 9 years old and being taken to restaurants and just thinking that this magical document would appear that enabled me to have pancakes and ice cream for dinner. I just thought it was the best thing ever. So I always knew that there was something special about menus. And ever since then, I've been collecting them. But my very first job in hospitality was managing an ice cream shop. I did that in summers for years, actually, from about 14, 15, 16, 17. And I did a stint at McDonald's. And actually, all I ever wanted was to work in hospitality. I told my parents I wanted to be a chef, and they said that I had to go and get a proper education.
Oh, wow.
So I did that. I studied journalism and psychology, and I did a very practical course at City University in London where you had to have a certain amount of hours of work experience to graduate. And while all the other students were sort of queuing up and fighting for spots at Time Out and the Times and the Guardian, I went straight for Square Meal, which was the biggest restaurant guide at the time. Called them up and said, can I work with you while I study? I went in to have a chat with the publisher. We talked for about 3 hours about food and restaurants. And at the end of it, I was like, so have I got a job? And he said, yeah, come in tomorrow. And so I ended up working 1 day a week throughout the whole of the university course with Square Meal. And then I ended up staying there for 16 years and becoming a restaurant critic. So I got to spend my days actually collecting menus, which is my favorite thing to do, and eating out. And I absolutely loved my time there. And I just got to the stage where I'd eaten in so many restaurants and interviewed so many founders and chefs that I could really walk into a restaurant and feel whether they would be there in a year or not. And I found that so sad, knowing how much passion goes into restaurants in general, and particularly independent restaurants. And I sort of got to the stage where I felt a bit helpless as a journalist. So obviously we could review a place and help them get customers through the door, but quite often I could see just a tiny few tweaks that you could make to make the experience better. And so for many years, me and my deputy editor, Anna Kibbe, who is now my co-founder at Two Forks, we talked about how we could actually properly help restaurants. And so finally, we decided to take the plunge and start our own business. And our very first product, which is very long since gone, was what we call the restaurant MOT, where we basically reviewed the restaurant, but for the restaurants themselves. And we had a sort of traffic light system. And
way back when, my background is as an operator in the independent sector, and I had a restaurant way back when. That was actually featured in Square Meal alongside loads of other guides. But it had never occurred to me, and then Jenny, and this is just, and this is one of the wonderful things about this podcast. Actually, I talk to these brilliant people, and then all the different variations of the jobs and roles that people go into in hospitality, and then you go, oh yeah, you'd never think that that's a role, but the restaurant critic, from the perspective of the operator, you sort of have this idea that it's sort of that it's sort of separate, that it's not part of the ecosystem in particular, but actually it was just really interested in, that you were walking into places and feeling that actually you could be part of the solution, part of helping them and supporting them. Because I suppose, of course, it is part of their marketing, isn't it? It is part of how they're communicating what they're doing and how they're reaching people. So I think I was just really interested in that being sort of, and that, I guess, so you're saying that was a sort of driving purpose that made you want to go and do the next thing, which was more than just critiquing.
Definitely. I guess I've always been a very curious person. I always say curiosity is my superpower. And so I'm always sort of asking myself, why is that not working? Or, I think about these things. And then obviously when you spend a lot of time thinking about things, it's nice to share those things with people. And back in the 90s and early noughties, restaurant PR was a big business. And we would always be invited to new openings, and I had quite a good relationship with a lot of PRs because, they filled my evenings with fun things to do. Yeah. And so whenever I went to a new place, I would always, send a thank you note to the PRs, send along a few notes of what I, thought about what they might be able to improve, because often you visited sort of in soft launches and while there was still time to make improvement. So I guess I became quite known for those little notes, and I guess the seed of realizing that this is perhaps something I could do for a living was when I would get specifically. So at Square Meal, we divided London into areas. So I had Clerkenwell, and I also had Chelsea and Knightsbridge, and for a while I did Notting Hill. And I started getting invitations to restaurants that weren't in my area, and I said, "Oh well, I can't help you with those." And they said, no, we want you in, we want your notes. So I guess that's where it all started from, that people were asking for the notes, and I thought, okay, maybe I could sell this in some way.
That's quite a challenge, isn't it? Because you're going in there as a critic, and the clue's in the name, so the operators themselves in general would be, one, on their best behavior, and two, being very defensive, I guess, a lot of the time. So to be somebody whose feedback that actually they didn't just value, they were seeking out, must mean that you must have a particularly good way of presenting those notes to people.
I guess I do always, I tend to talk with a smile, and things tend to land a bit better. But I guess there was also a reason why the note went to the PR rather than the company, because, as you say, operators can be quite defensive. And I think it's purely from how much love is poured into the business. And, they will have very specific reasons why they've set things up a certain way. And it's hard to hear that something that you've spent so long thinking about and perfecting, hearing that it's not necessarily perfect is difficult, but sometimes it's just a tiny little tweak that you can make to just improve a little bit.
Yeah, wow. Well, but so I'm hats off to you for having that skill of being able to pass those messages along and for them to be received well as well. So you're going into places and basically doing kind of like an MOT thing. You say, like you're going and you're reviewing them and giving them those notes as part of actually what you're providing. How did that develop?
So we would file these long reports, and we had a traffic light system, and we would basically sort of do the visit, review the whole journey from pre-visit, the online present, and often lack thereof back then. The sort of exterior of the restaurant and the curb appeal, the welcome at the door or the lack of that, and the full sort of service food, everything, and then the follow-up afterwards. And we would just compile this all in a big report. We'd work on it for ages and then we'd file it through. And actually, you mentioned you wanted to talk about some learnings that we made along the way. And actually, my biggest learning that I still remind myself of every single day was working for a quite established pub group in London, where we'd been in to do MOT reports of all of their South London pubs. And there were a few things that we'd marked red on the traffic light system, like quite major things that needed dealing with straight away. But we waited to complete all of the MOTs before we filed them. And I think that was a sort of journalist thing to do. Like, we always wait for the deadline before filing. Nobody hands anything in early. And we sat down at this meeting, and the founder of this pub company looked at me and he said, "Why didn't you call me immediately and tell me about this 2 weeks ago?" And I didn't have an answer for him. And it was so clear that we'd completely messed up. And that was one of the biggest learning things. Like, if you see something that is wrong, and I don't know why we hadn't thought of it ourselves. I'm the kind of person that will walk into a restaurant and see loo paper on the floor and just pick it up. Because when you worked in hospitality, you know that you should just roll your sleeves up and
just keep
muck in.
Or else,
Exactly. And I don't know why we were so focused. I think it was a new product, and it was our first big client, and we just wanted to do a great job on these reports. So we were so focused on the report that we kind of forgot what we were doing.
That's what it sounds. It sounds like you were so focused on the, like, wanting to have that moment at the end, like, wow, look at this, look what we've produced, and miss the point, like, someone's asked for help.
Completely. So that was a big learning curve. Another thing that we learned was when you become known for helping people who aren't doing particularly well, you end up working, or you end up eating in a lot of restaurants and bars that perhaps aren't very good. And I was reminded of the whole reason why I went into the industry in the beginning, is that I love the food, I love the people, I just love great hospitality businesses, and we weren't necessarily at the time working with the best hospitality businesses. So we kind of we started asking ourselves, is this really what we want to do? And then actually it was the clients that came up with the answer for us, because they said, when we would file this report and we would sort of highlight things that were in need of improvement on the website or in emails or whatever, they would say, but you're writers, can't you just sort this out for us? And it was actually in the process of Googling best website practice, I came across this thing called copywriting that I hadn't even heard of before. And I started delving in. I joined this Facebook group called Copywriter Club. I started listening to lots of podcasts and learning about this. And then the penny dropped that my psychology degree and my journalism experience could sort of fuse into this amazing thing called copywriting, where you actually change people's behavior with your words. And that's when Two Forks, as it is now, was really born. And I started also experiencing that my complete menu geekery that I've always had with me from, 8 years old was also based in behavioral science and copywriting and how you can get people to order in certain ways. And then I've never looked back. We don't do the MOTs anymore. We just focused on menus and brand messaging, and I absolutely love it. So I've landed exactly where I want to be, even though I didn't get to be a chef.
Oh yeah, but you got to eat great food. So, and then someone else cooked it for you. So still, but I mean, I think it's the psychology and the writing, but also that experience of the industry, and as a critic, having to know what it is that the readers are looking for. So you have to be in the psychology place from the customer's point of view all the time when you're looking at stuff. And I imagine that's quite a perfect mix, because I think that's quite that's reasonably rare, I find, in the industry, that you can have copywriters, but for them to have the true understanding of hospitality and that psychology of the customer, but also the needs of the operator, it must be quite unique. But I really want to get into menus, because I mean, I can go copywriting and branding, because that's really exciting as well. But menus, because obviously years as an operator myself, and obviously having to put together these menus and wine lists for that matter. But at least with the wine lists, you get somebody's giving you half the text for you. But putting
Yeah.
So my job, so I was front of house, and I always had chefs in the kitchen who were absolutely brilliant at what they were doing. But when it comes to the chef gives you the menu and you go, no, because even I can't understand that. And that, is it even English? And what words are we using here? And even the choice of words you're using, what order you're putting them in, never mind where you place each dish on the menu or how you present it on the page. Oh my goodness, I'm already geeking out, and that you've just introduced an idea to me. So go for it. Tell me, this is exciting.
Well, it is incredible how a menu is essentially a restaurant's only sales document, or certainly a restaurant's most important sales document. And quite often it is put together by the kitchen team and given a once-over by somebody front of house, or if you're lucky, someone in marketing. But it's always rushed, it's always last minute, and it's done just before it needs to be printed. And there is so much.
But quite often those people giving it a once-over don't understand. This is what so at least I was sort of saying, what does that word mean? But quite often you go, oh, I don't want to admit that I don't know what that word means, without the acknowledgement. Well, if you don't know it, then your customers aren't going to know what that is either. And why are the chefs using this language? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm a big fan of actually bringing customers into the process and getting, I always run interviews, a bit like this one on Google Meets or Zoom, where I interview customers. I get them to interact with the menu and tell me about what they're looking at and why, and what stands out to them, what's confusing. We get them to talk about the style of cuisine in general and the particular restaurant, and just articulate the way that they talk about the food. And you really want to be using the words that your customers use to talk about you, and to talk about what they like and what they don't like, because then you know it's going to land with them. And really look out for those emotive words that they use when they're describing something that they really like. Obviously, you need to strike a balance. People go out to have experiences that they can't have at home. And I think it's okay to have the odd word that people don't understand what it is, because there's a bit of element of discovery, and they can have a little bit of tableside interaction with the server to find out more about it. But something I like to do when I go into a restaurant that has a menu with a lot of sort of expert terms or difficult words, I get them to highlight anything that they think that their nan or even their 10-year-old child wouldn't understand. And then look at the menu with all those highlights and realize that actually it takes quite a lot of specialist knowledge to know all of these things. So maybe hone it down and keep it to 2 or 3.
Because it shouldn't be too much of an effort, should it? As you say, you want the discovery. You want to have that element of it, like, this is exciting, this is something interesting. But if there's too much on there that you just don't understand, it's intimidating and too much hard work, and you just then go, okay, I'll just have the thing that I can understand, and that'll be the end of that. And it's sort of, I can feel the disappointment already in myself. I'm like going, oh, okay. I know. I once went with a friend to, so my background has been in fine dining, but I once went with a friend who'd never been to fine dining ever before. Their diet up until this point had just been burgers and chips. And actually, if I go out for a burger with them, they're the best person to order it, because they know exactly what they're ordering. But I remember taking them into a fine dining restaurant, and we'd got all dressed up for it. I think it actually had a Michelin star. So we got all dressed up for it, and we'd gone in specially. And I just remember the whole experience, me almost giggling all the way through, just how intimidated my friend was the whole way through. because we had the wine flight and everything, and the sommeliers coming over and telling us stuff, and my friend's just sitting there going, I don't know what you're talking about. What? And never mind. And I just, but actually, on a more everyday level, you can accidentally be intimidating your customers with allowing chefs to write the menu, for example.
Absolutely. And I think something that's often forgotten is that you need to look at the menu in the context of where it's going to be. So a menu doesn't exist on its own in a vacuum. It exists within a living, breathing restaurant. And so you need to look at the level of formality of the restaurant and the types of customers that come in there. And I think what happens a lot of the time, because menus tend to originate from chefs, is that chefs, whether they work in a casual dining restaurant or a pub, they will look up to Michelin star chefs and fine dining chefs. And those are the people that they follow on TikTok and Instagram, and they will save up and eat in those restaurants and aspire to put out those kind of menus. So you often see, particularly in pubs, that menu language follows the trends of fine dining. And then the context of a more casual setting like a pub, it just doesn't work. And I think for one of the reasons why it doesn't work is the staffing level. So when you're in a 1 or 2 star Michelin restaurant and you have 3 servers to a table and the staff ratio is really high, there's a lot of tableside interaction, and you can get away with then having really complex menus because somebody is going to be there, to explain it before you order, but also when the food comes out, they present it and they tell you everything that's on the plate. That doesn't happen in a pub. So the menu has to work harder the more casual your service is.
But and also in those experiences, as much as I found it very funny watching my friend being intimidated, I'm going to say that's the point. It's not the point. They are experiences themselves, aren't they? So actually, those menus are supposed to be challenging in those ways because there's part. I mean, not always, admittedly, but there's some restaurants you go into are actually a plate of food coming out or something specially curated that you don't even know exactly what it is, and then having to someone explain it to you as they put it down is part of the experience. So it's a different game, isn't it? And it's just as you're saying, the number of, when I've had a small country pub and having, not arguments is the wrong word, but just the conversation is it juice or is it gravy? Is it creme anglaise or is it custard? Because do we have to, or what is the dish you're actually creating, and does that word matter to you or to the dish, and yes, as you say, or to the customers? Although I say these days people do know what juice means and have an understanding of creme anglaise, but I remember those conversations long time ago.
Yeah, well, language is evolving, and everything tends to follow trends. So in the 90s, everyone was writing about on a bed of, and having lots of sort of frilly language. That the provenance started coming into it, and everything was sort of Gloucester old spot this, and I think then people started growing tired of that, and there was a new era in menu writing, kind of fronted by people like or restaurants like Lyle's, for example, in Shoreditch, where you could go in and the menu would just have like 4 words. It would say mackerel, gooseberry, potato, dill, or something, and there would be no description at all. And they became really trendy, started winning the stars and awards, and then that got mimicked in a more casual setting, and customers were just going, what do you mean? Like, what is it? Tell me what's on the plate. So I think you have to get that balance of, in the context of the setting of your restaurant, give people as much of a description as they're going to need in order to picture it in their head and sort of feel that this is something I'm going to be enjoying eating. And that will be shorter or longer depending on your restaurant, but keeping it simple and talking the customer's language with perhaps 1 or 2 little flourishes or little bits of something that they don't understand, just to add a bit of interest, I think is the sweet spot.
And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because you want to emotionally engage a customer at the same time as not overwhelm them with too many words, at the same time as get your full range on one sheet of paper. I mean, what a challenge.
Well, overwhelm is a real thing. And actually, people are now talking about menu overwhelm. I was in a pub last night. I'm not going to say which one it is. We don't want to name and shame people, but
No.
I was in this very casual setting, and the menu was so big. I was looking at this thing going, what is this? That there were all these different categories of foods, and basically anything that anyone would ever want to eat was on this menu. And I can see where they're coming from. They want to offer a little bit of something for everyone, but they end up offering essentially nothing really for anyone, because you just look at this thing and you think there is no way that the quality of 40 different dishes can be any good. And when 40 different dishes are crammed onto a single piece of A3 paper, it just looks a mess. And so you end up, my eye just went to burgers, because it was at the top middle of the menu. It stood out, and I was like, okay, I can't be bothered to read all this other stuff. I'm just going to order a burger. And so that's really important. Think about giving your menu a bit of breathing space so that people can find what they're actually wanting to have. And I think a lot of chefs get very precious about their dishes, and they want to, they feel proud about, they worked on them for weeks or months, and they want them to be on the menu. And I'm always advocating for shaving off things. And I try to always say, look, don't think of them as gone forever. The dishes that you are proud of and you know are really good but aren't getting ordered are probably just getting lost, and people can't see the wood for the trees. So take them off and rotate them in. Use them as specials and give them that sort of platform that they need for people to really discover them. So I think shorter is better in menu terms, particularly now when people are so overwhelmed with influence everywhere.
Because it's that whole piece, isn't it, on paradox of choice? Like, we as humans with our, walking around, we want to have choice. We want to think that we are choosing what we're doing next, what we're eating next. But this paradox is that actually when you give us too much choice, we just go, no, I don't know, too much, take it away. I'll have what I know, and I'm just going to stick to the one thing, and I'm not going to change. And I think it's that game of playing that, isn't it? It's like understanding that you want people to feel that they've got a choice, but actually the kind thing to do is to limit their choices so that they find making those choices easier.
And help your customer have a better experience, because you're going to know what mains go best with what sides, and if you order that starter, it's a little bit too similar to that main, so that's not particularly good. Guiding that experience is you're doing people a favor. So think of it as guiding. I think when I say I do menu engineering, people are like, oh, that sounds a bit manipulative, and oh, you're pressing extra money out of customers. But actually, you can think of it just as guiding a better experience and giving people better value for money, because they're going to have a better meal at the end of it. And then if you make a few extra pounds on every check, that's not a bad thing either.
It's a very, very good thing in hospitality, given how razor thin our margins are anyway. So yes, if there's a little bit more to be taken out of that just because you've managed to design it properly and engineer it, then that is really valuable. So so when you start with a new client, I mean, what are the first questions you're asking them?
Well, because I'm curious and I love people in hospitality, I tend to have a bit of a conversation like this. I just want to get to know them, where they're coming from, what their journey has been. Usually we take about an hour and a half, 2 hours, just to really get to know. Actually, we start with a 15-minute coffee chat before we even explore whether we want to work with them. So that's another thing I learned. We had one nightmare client. I'm not going to say who, but it was years ago. And Anna and I looked at each other and we said, what's the point? If if you're working for yourself and you have all the extra admin that comes with running a business, the one thing that you can do is pick and choose who you work with. So we made a pact to only work with people we genuinely like and on brands that we love. And we've stuck to that. We've turned quite a bit of business. That there's been months when we've not paid ourselves because there wasn't anything that was right. But when it's right, it's so right. And it's become so worth it. It's the best decision we've ever made. So we now do a 15-minute just coffee on Zoom before we even take the first meeting to see if we want to work together. We used to travel. I lived down in Kent. I used to get on the train just to have an initial meeting with people. I wasted so many hours on trains only to find out that we weren't a fit. Luckily in hospitality, people in general are amazing and they are super interesting, and I tend to spark off them and we have a great conversation. But I always have that sort of initial chat just to see whether they're good people. And then we have a big chat like this. And it's amazing how often you come across really interesting little bits from their past or their journey or even the early origins of the brand that you have no idea, even though you've been following that business for years. And so that's kind of where my work starts, is highlighting those really interesting things that that should be brought forward. Because if I find it interesting, chances are that other people will find it interesting. And having interesting stories around the brand and the people within the business, I think, is part of the success of any great business.
Absolutely. And I think even all operators tend to forget that their how important their story is to what they're doing, in terms of just that what brand is and how people engage with them and what people think of them, and that actually that piece of why they do what they do and where that passion comes from, driving that purpose, which then ends up being what the brand is. It's not something that they can create. It's something how other people feel about it, isn't it? And it's So, and I think a lot of operators forget that. They think that those things are insignificant or don't matter. They're just thinking about that solid, front door, rather than all of the other reasons.
And I think also
coming through it.
Also, people think about, I told that story when we first opened, or it's on the website, and they don't feel like they want to go on and on about it. But there are certain messages that deserve telling over and over again. So we always start with that piece, and then something that we also do, whether we work on messaging or on menus, we always do lots of customer research. I never do anything without it. So I want to find out what makes the customers tick. Why do they come to this restaurant? What do they love about it? What don't they like about it? One of my favorite questions is, what would you change if you were in charge? And customers have so much feedback on that. So you end up not only with a good steer of things that you can improve, but also great ideas for new product development and where you can go next. And so that's always really interesting. And then really digging into how customers talk when they're talking about the restaurant and what they like about it and what they don't like. So that's always a big piece. And then after that, we try to find that sweet spot between what the business really cares about, the stories and where the business comes from and the people behind it, what the customers love, and finding that sort of sweet spot of things that both parties are really passionate about, and then create the brand story or the menu from that sweet spot.
Because that is the sweet spot of what the brand is, isn't it? It's where the passion and purpose is coming from the business, plus what the customers feel about it, and that bit in the middle is what the brand is, not the logo or the strap line,
not the logo.
Not the logo. But I think it's nice that well, not nice. I mean, it's good that you can get that feed. Going back to where operators sometimes feel very defensive, and asking their customers becomes a scary thing to do, because actually the risk is, if you open that door to what do the customers think, you might get some great insights, but you'll also get a whole heap of misunderstanding and useless advice, which then you don't take action on, which then damages the relationship with your customer. But having a third party do it, it puts that filter in place, doesn't it? That sort of goes, okay, we're actually getting some really valuable information here, but there's not that expectation of from the customer for that.
Yeah, some brands are very much like, we don't want to ask our customers. We're the experts. We want them to see us as the experts. Yeah. We don't want to seem weak or like we don't know what we're doing. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I have that early coffee chat. I talk so much about the research that we do that I tend to scare off the people who would be resistant to that in the early days, because that's a complete non-negotiable for me. I need to talk to customers or I can't do my job. So that helps weed out. I think most people are genuinely happy. And actually, one of my favorite things is to present customer research back to operators, because most of them have never done this before. They've never in-depth interviewed their customers. They've never heard them talk at length about why it is that they're coming, what they love. And usually it's the biggest ego boost that you can ever give to somebody. And usually it's an hour of them just sitting there and smiling and wondering, why have we never done this before?
And exactly, that's the thing. So they may be afraid of asking those questions because they think they're opening the doors to criticism. But actually what they're missing is those customers are customers for a reason. They love the business. That's why they keep coming back. So they're full of lots of very positive emotions, I can imagine that's very rewarding for you and for the operators to hearing.
And also to have someone curate that for you, because if you're an operator, or particularly if you're an independent restaurateur, and you might be monitoring Google reviews and TripAdvisor, our brains are programmed to remember the bad stuff. Right? So you could be trawling through 80, 90 amazing reviews, and then someone gives you a 2-star and moans about something that you know they're not right about. That's all you can remember.
And that's what you for someone else to take.
So for someone else to take the good stuff and present it back in a gushing way. Like, I love to do word clouds where all the amazing words are standing out. Customer quotes that are worthy of sticking on the wall. And then summarizing the negatives into a really productive list of, these are things that you might want to look at, is so much better than reading lengthy reviews of people complaining.
But also those complaints they're not necessarily the right people to be asking. And I say this a lot to people. When you get that negative review on TripAdvisor, it is worth, and I'm being extreme because actually sometimes you do need to check that you haven't done anything wrong. But most of the time, those are not the right people to be asking what they think, because the reason why they had such a bad reaction to your business is because they're not your target customer. So reacting to them is not a good thing to do. Whereas actually what you want to be doing is getting good quality, negative or constructive feedback from people who are your right customer. So I find that having been an operator and been on the receiving end of people ranting at me via and also being an operator before TripAdvisor existed, which was blissful. You could
those were the days.
We put feedback cards on the table, and you got good quality feedback because they were your customers. You didn't get this. It feels, and I feel very sorry for operators that do get bombarded, and sometimes, because as I say, you can fixate on that, or you say as well, you can fixate on that negative for a long time because you're programmed.
Absolutely.
That's the human brain, isn't it?
Yeah. There's even, there are professional complainers out there who have made it their job to write bad reviews just to get freebies. And, but life is too short to worry about those people.
Well, they want to be critics who think that's what a critic's job is. But as you say from the very start, that isn't how a critic approaches their job.
Yeah. Very true. No, I think if someone cares enough about your business to give up time in their day to answer a survey or even get on a video interview, those are the people you want to keep really close because they already have that emotional connection with your business.
Absolutely. So you've got a good picture of the business, and you've got a good picture of where the business owner is coming from, and you've got an idea, really good understanding of the customers, and then so that's that magic that then happens when you're putting together the menus.
Absolutely, and that's when I get out my behavioral science toolkit and start figuring out, okay, this is where we're coming from. This is what we know about the customers. These are our goals. This is what we're trying to do, whether that's just communication in general or whether it's a menu specifically. What technique can we apply to make that happen? And that's the super geeky stuff, when you can start rearranging a menu so that certain things get more attention, changing the way that you describe things. All of that stuff is super geeky.
So for anyone listening who wants to just apply just a little bit of this, so I have a vague understanding, but on a piece of paper, that the average person will look to certain places. What are the key things that sort of tips there with like, where do you place your most profitable item on the menu, for example?
So it kind of depends a little bit about the layout, and also it's different in every context. But typically on an A4 menu, people tend to view it in an upside down L. So they'll start in the top left, they'll move to the right, and then they'll move down the right-hand side. The left-hand corner is what we call Menu Siberia. And it's amazing how many restaurants and pubs have their sides in the bottom left, which would be extra money and a potentially better experience for the customer if that got pushed. So never put your sides in the bottom left. Put your allergy information and things that people come and look for, put that in the bottom left. But more importantly, having really clear headers. So explaining to people where they need to look when they're looking for something specific, not trying to be too clever. You can have dish names that are perhaps made up with funny words or puns, but the header, like the signposting copy on the menu, needs to be super clear so that you're helping people find it. I'm a big advocate for pictures on menus, and I'm getting a lot of pushback, but they really, really work. And there are ways to make them elegant. So you can have illustrations. It doesn't have to be photographs. Like, I think I blame Wimpy. People blame, there's this understanding or general agreement that menus with pictures are cheap. But actually, you can do it really elegantly. And if you are able to showcase to people what to expect on the plate by having really stylish photography, or just even little playful illustrations just to plant the seed of an idea. The Hawksmoor menu, for example, has a tiny, tiny little illustration of an oyster, just highlighting the oyster section. So they have the starters and they have the oysters, and before they move into the mains, they have that section that just draws the eyes in to have that oyster there, and getting people to think, oh, maybe I'll have some of those before I start. So using pictures strategically to draw attention to certain things can be really, really successful, and something that anyone can try quite easily. Also just highlighting certain sections either with color or with some kind of frame around it, just to draw the attention in. We're fighting for people's attention all of the time. And I think if we want to guide the experience, really highlight the things that you want people to see. When we worked on the caravan menus recently, we used almost like yellow is their signature color anyway, but we used almost like a yellow highlighter. And without any kind of explanation at all, we just highlighted some of the dishes in yellow. Yes. And they were the dishes that we found customers liked the most. The chefs loved preparing. They had decent margins on them. And the restaurant, everyone was proud of the dish. So, okay, let's highlight these ones. And it really just draws the eye in. And it can also help your teams on the floor to, if they need to recommend anything, they can say, oh, just look at the yellow highlights are our customer favorites or whatever. Yeah. So that's a simple way to guide the experience. But increasingly, given that menu overwhelm is a thing that I think is only going to be growing, actually having a curated selection and not making people read the whole menu can be really effective as well. So we worked with a restaurant down in Brighton called Burnt Orange, where on the flip side of the menu, so they have a menu, it's small plates, there's lots and lots of choice. If you turn that menu over, it just has the burnt orange selection. I can't remember exactly what we called it, but it's basically the curated choice. And it just says, that's always presented first. So the server will say, you can take a look at the menu here, but if you just want to get on and have a conversation and start enjoying your drinks, you can get the kitchen to do it for you. And it just sort of describes what they're going to get.
And that's so lovely, isn't it? Because actually that's that understanding that why people are going out and wanting to eat in venues is not, I mean, I'm sort of not the food and drink. It's the experience. And actually for some, it might be, to look at the menu and make those choices. But for many, it's actually the person or the people they're with. It's the time to spend with other people. And they're coming to this place because they know it's going to be good and they trust it. So if they trust it, they don't want to spend time thinking, oh, so, I know, there's a waitress and you come to the table and you say, are you ready to order? Oh, no, just because we haven't started looking yet. And we've been there half an hour because people want to talk. Yeah. It's not looking at the menu is not what they want to do. I love that idea. Absolutely fantastic. So I just want to finish because I just want to ask a really quick question though, how you feel about digital menus.
I am both a huge fan and I can see the potential. The menu geek in me is very excited about what you can do. And I'm working on a few digital menu projects that are super exciting in terms of what you can do with suggestions and the layering of media. So you can even have little videos showing off the ingredients and the cooking. And you can definitely guide the guest experience better with a digital menu than you can with anything printed. I feel slightly sad about the sort of, I think the inevitable eventual decline of the print menu because it's been such a big part of my life. And I'm really glad I've got my collection and maybe it will be worth something one day. But I as much as I love a print menu and would hang them on my wall, I actually have some on my wall. But I do think the future is in digital, and I'm very excited about what you can do with them. One thing that we've found on working on digital projects is you can't really have both. So what we've discovered is when operators naturally want to have a great experience for all of their customers, and they want to cater to the ones who are digital first and those who aren't. If you give people a choice, neither of the menus kind of end up working, particularly the digital one, because the suppliers of digital menus need to make money somehow. So they either charge per cover or a percentage or something like that in order for you to use their software. And unless all of those transactions go through, you end up paying that company for the hard work that you're doing with your print menu as well. So to make the most of the opportunities on a digital menu and for that to be cost effective, maybe that model will change. But at the moment, you kind of have to go all in. And generally, you end up guiding a better experience and making more money. So it's a win-win for everybody. But it is also a bit of a sad day for me. And
I think the reason I asked it was because, I mean, you got me all excited about menus, but also I think there is so much in sort of that holding a menu in your hand and that being part of the experience that so I guess maybe just at the minute, just in a world where there seems to be too much digital, but you're right. There's so much. It does sound like it could be quite exciting. So, like you, I'd be sad to see the hard copy menus go, but maybe they'll stick around in some form.
Yeah, they can become collector's items.
Yeah. Maybe if you like collecting vinyl, it'll just be like that. We'll just think of it like that. You'll have the right. I've got a real menu. Anyway, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. It's absolutely fascinating. And I'm certain I'm going to be talking to you again, because you've just got me started on a whole nerdy geek line for me to go and take a look at now as well.
Brilliant.
But tell me, how can people get hold of you if they want to find out more, or potentially work with you or get more information?
Well, I'm the only Annica Wainwright on LinkedIn, so I'm very easy to find. And I do connect with everyone on there, so please find me on LinkedIn. And my website is twoforks.co.uk. And those will be the places to find me.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I've absolutely loved this, and hope to speak to you again sometime soon.
Thank you. As you can tell, I could talk menus all day. So anytime. It's been an absolute pleasure. Great to get to know you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.